So in this video, I want to use the Mega Charizard X EX UPC as an example of what can happen to a great product when there is far too much supply compared to demand. This has been a pretty popular product that people have been talking about recently because of how much prices have dropped. On pre-order, this peaked at around $400, and now today, after it's being released in the last few weeks, it's dropped all the way to 180. So it's dropped over 50% since its peak price on pre-order. Now the question is, has it bottomed? Well, no one really knows, but I'm going to show you here at the end the Sword and Shield Charizard UPC, which I feel like these are pretty, I guess, relatable products. I feel like they're pretty much the same. Um, I guess respect to their, respective to their, era. I feel like they hold pretty similar value, and the packs inside, I feel like relative to the era, they're both pretty similar, tier level wise. What could potentially happen to this product? Now, I am not saying that it's going to play the exact same scenario with this Charizard UPC as the Sword and Shield one did, but it's just to show you guys what can happen, and don't think that buying at this price that it's at its bottom, or that now is the time to buy before it skyrockets, right? And especially now, I don't think you can. It's reasonable to expect that to happen, but it's pretty obvious that right now there's so much supply, and even with this high sales volume, still like around 100 UPCs plus 150 UPCs are selling per day, which is a lot. Prices have not gone back up because there's just so much supply out there. As you can see, there's 21 pages here, and even on eBay, they're everywhere. You can even buy them for around like $170. So yeah, there's just so much out there. This product, like I said, I mean, I really believe this is a pretty good product. I mean, you look at what's actually inside of here. The promo is pretty cool. Has a good pack selection. Has Surging Sparks, Drain Together, Destined Rivals, Mega Evolution, Phantasmal Flames. I think in the future, when these sets get a bit older, I think this pack selection is going to be seen to be pretty good. I think this is, like I said, relative to the era, pretty on tier with the Sword and Shield Charizard UPC. This I really think is the exact same situation, which is why I'm even comparing it to the Sword and Shield Charizard UPC, because they're both great products when they came out. I mean, obviously the product, they're obviously the same throughout the entirety when it gets released, and later on in the future, when they get more expensive, it's the same product the entire time. But the reasons why these products were got cheap or dropped so much in price is because of just the sheer amount of supply. I think there is a middle ground for the amount of supply that could possibly get bought to the point where it could rebound relatively quickly. I feel like there's some middle ground area, but it just seems like with this product, it's facing the same situation as the Sword and Shield Charizard UPC, where there's so much volume and so much availability, where a lot of investors or a lot of just people, I think, are looking at this as, okay, there's so much out there, it's going to be cheap for so long, I'm probably not going to buy. And that sort of can be true, and we saw that happening with the Sword and Shield UPC, which possibly could this happen again to this Mega Charizard UPC? It's possible, and I'm gonna show you guys that even when the Sword and Shield UPC, even when that one was way cheaper, even under MSRP, it did not get bought out because like to rebound even back to MSRP for a long time because of the volume of product there was. So like I said, I do think there's a middle ground where, okay, if there's a lot of supply, if it seems like, okay, there's a lot, but it could get bought out where prices could start going up, I could see how there may be more investors or people see more potential in the product, because these both are great products, but there's just so much where it just seems like it's gonna be there forever, and that's exactly what happened to the Sword and Shield UPC. And I want to show you guys an example of just how long the Charizard UPC from Sword and Shield really was. You can see it was released pretty much exactly 3 years ago, October 28th, 2022. Now, when you go in price charting, look at how long this was so cheap for. All the way from when it got released, it pre-ordered for I believe $300, $400, something like that. It went all the way down to about MSRP was 120, right? Look how cheap it got. It got down to the 90s and low 80s, and you can see, look at this. This is 1 year after release. It was $90, and you keep going, still under MSRP. It was pretty much MSRP all the way like 2 years after the product was released, and just recently it started going up because of this boom. It took that long, 2 years, to even really break MSRP because there was so much supply. And during this whole duration, the product obviously never changed, but look at the product. Very, good promos, arguably probably better than this, Mega Charizard UPC. And look at the pack selection. Obviously, Astral isn't the best thing ever, but Brilliant, Evolving Skies, Fusion, Darkness, Vivid, it's pretty good, right? And it took 2 years to break MSRP from release. There was that much supply. And this product, was the same during the whole time. And it was great, but it was the volume that really pushed people away to buy it. And you can see why. Because it took so long for it to actually go up because there's just so much. And it seems like it's possible that this is facing the same fate where there's just an extreme amount of supply. And, before this was released, this was sort of already known. If you did a little bit of digging in this whole, investing space, there was word that this was getting a large amount of, supply because people got allocated large amounts. And we also, see that with, GameStop. I made a few videos showing you guys GameStop. A lot of these places have had tons of these Charizard UPCs allocated. Like some GameStop's got like 90, 100, like, some maybe even more of this product. And even though the market has gone down, that is a large amount of supply for a product like this. And it sort of spoke, okay, there's a lot of these. And I know recently, I think this was one of the products that was rumored to possibly showing up at Costco's or something. I think that's, I think I made a video talking about that, right? But there's just so much of this. And I truly believe if there's any more supply, if we get another wave of these UPCs, through like Costco or wherever, this might end up being the same situation. If the market, from here on doesn't really see an upturn, this could be a pretty similar situation to the Charizard UPC from Sword and Shield, where it's a great product out the gate. I still, I've said this the whole time. I think this is a good product. It's going to do well in the long term. It's kind of obvious, but it's like, how much supply is there really, and how long is it going to take to dry up? Because like I showed you guys here, it took 2 years for this Charizard UPC that's, pretty good to even break MSRP. 2 years. Do you want your money to sit for 2 years on a product when there's so much supply out there and potentially the market maybe is, sort of seeing a downturn right now? It's something to think about. But, is it possible this is the bottom and maybe next year, this, the market goes back up and there's no more supply of this, and maybe next year this would be seen to be a great buy? That's possible, but it is important to be aware of things that can happen. There is a point where there is so much supply where it doesn't go up quickly. Because I know there was a saying when the market was super strong that, when there's restocks, when there's huge amounts of supply or something that hits, it's going to get bought out. We're not in that time anymore. And I've showed you guys an example of what can really happen to a product, even though it's good. If there's too much supply, it doesn't matter. It just, people's confidence in the product sort of just drops. So we'll see if this gets more restocks or whatever in the future. If it does, and the market doesn't go up, I think this could see the same fate as the Sword and Shield one. But it really depends on how the market is, and if this gets more supply than there is already out there, because definitely this, was a very hyped up product, and it pre-ordering for $400 shows that. But when being released, people realized, and the ones that didn't know, how much supply there really was. So that's all I want to show you guys in this video. Hope you enjoyed, and let me know, are you investing at this price point, or do you think it's going to go lower? Personally, it's hard to say. It really just depends. If there's more supply, that comes out in the near future, I think it's going to go lower than 180. I mean, it already sort of has at one point it's like 170. I mean, I've talked about this possibly being one of the first products maybe hits MSRP. If next year the market doesn't go up and we get more supply, I can see it happening. So that's all I want to show in this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.